as men, if we recognize that and understand that, life would be much easier, that women are really, really smart and really have a lot of power in relationships. Women now can make good money and have their own career, so it's changed for women that they no longer have to marry for status and economic security. So what I think needs to happen is that couples need to explore their expectations about the roles in marriage, about the power differential.
This is the first time that I know that my colleague, Mr. Miao, has the desire to get into marriage.
Yeah. So are you married?
Yeah.
Okay. She's out of the picture.
He's cute or she's pretty is not a really good basis to marry.
The fundamental thing is proximity. Similarities in terms of education, background, socioeconomic status, value systems. There's just all kinds of things that have to connect. But the meeting and the initial attraction is kind of the foundation for building that possibility.
That's very important advice to young people. They spend a lot of time online, and maybe their values are built by online messages.
One of the things that I've been so impressed with China is the economic miracle that has occurred in this country over the past 30 or 40 years. You've had so many people who have moved from poverty and modest levels of existence to very much a middle class or an affluent level. And so marriage for people who are at lower socioeconomic status, it may not be an option to divorce, but if you have the economic resources, it becomes an option. We see the same thing in the United States. That it was interesting. One of the statistics I came across in America is that prior to 1976, the majority of married women with school-age children worked primarily in the home. They were homemakers, they took care of the husband, they took care of the children. But after 1976, the majority of married women with children worked outside of the home.
So what happened then?
Well, they had education, they had opportunities, and they were able to pursue a career. For women, marriage was about status and economic security. You went from the protection and economic status of your father to your husband. Yeah. But women now can make good money and have their own career. So it's changed for women that they no longer have to marry for status and economic security. They marry for companionship. Yes. And maybe to have a family, maybe to have a child. So women have become much more particular about selecting a husband. It's no longer they have to do it. It's like I can take my time. I can pick and choose.
Yes. And I can choose again.
Yes, again. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
And again. Yeah. So in modern society, is marriage still be considered as the cornerstone of a stable society?
Yes, I believe it is. I think worldwide, globally, that marriage still remains, despite the increasing divorce rate, it still remains very popular. Give you an example. I've done some work in the country of Cyprus, the Republic of Cyprus, which is an island in the Mediterranean. And in Cyprus, it has the highest marriage rate in Europe, but it also has the highest divorce rate in Europe. If there are opportunities to exit a troubled marriage, many people will make that choice with it. So I think what we're finding is that the institution of marriage is evolving, and that people are starting to recognize that if you've got close to half of marriages that end in divorce, something's not right there. We have to find some way to be able to maybe change the nature of marriage so that it is more balanced and equitable for both the wife and for both the husband. The traditional roles may have worked 100 years ago, but they don't really fit in modern society. So we're kind of going through a transition, and we're in the middle of it, and we may not even recognize it, but definitely the data, the statistics show us that we are going through that transition.
I have some friends, both male and female. They will say something strange to me. They say, I just want to experience the marriage. just experience once or twice, but they think their marriages are doomed to failure.
Yeah.
So how do you see that kind of?
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I would do is I would share with them the statistics to say, yes, it's kind of scary that 45, close to half of marriages end in divorce. If you were to go to the airport to get on a plane and somebody were to announce to say, there's a 45% or 50% chance this plane is going to crash, then most people are never going to get on that plane. So it's the same thing with marriage. If you know 45, 50%. But here's the kicker. That statistic is an aggregate data that applies to all marriages. So a single marriage is either going to be 100% successful or 100% end up in divorce. So we know that aggregate data only applies to groups of people, not to individuals or to individual couples with that. The interesting thing is that although almost half of marriages end in divorce in America and in many other countries approaching that number, the vast majority of divorced people remarry. And I think all of us are seeking a partner, all of us are seeking a companion to share life with. Life's a lot easier when you have somebody with you. Now, a lot of couples decide not to make it a formal marriage, a legal marriage, but they'll form a relationship that is committed between the two of them. So when I use the term marriage, we can talk about legal marriage that is sanctioned by the state, but we can also talk about a committed relationship, and functionally that is a marriage, whether we call it or not. So we may call that couples, we may call it a relationship, but it's still a union between two people.
Marriage, yes. And talking about marriage, we often assume that people marry for love. That's in theory. But in reality, even a marriage between just two people often involves complex power dynamics. So in an ideal marriage, should power be completely equal between the two parts? Or how should we measure the power dynamics?
Excellent question. I think it's impossible to have any relationship where the power dynamics are absolutely equal. For example, you find that in many what we call dual career couples, where both the husband and the wife are pursuing a career, somebody typically is making more money than the other one. I do a lot of work with medical doctors, and medical doctor may make a lot of money, and his wife may have a part-time job or even a career, but he makes 90% of the money, she makes 10% of the money. But should he have 90% of the authority in the marriage and she has 10%, that's not going to work. And there's often a lot of conflict with that. Back to your initial question, I think that historically we all kind of think about falling in love and marrying as just kind of a natural sequence in life. But while some people do choose to marry because they fall in love, a lot of people will marry, particularly second or third marriages, because they see that there are pragmatic reasons to marry. In other words, he'll be a good provider, she'll be a good companion, she'll be a good mother, he'll be a good protector with that. So people can marry for practical reasons in addition to romantic love. And historically, most marriages were not about romantic love. Back in the Middle Ages in Europe, love was something you had outside of marriage. Marriage was typically a political union between families that would come together with that. So what I think needs to happen is that couples need to explore their expectations about the roles in marriage, about the power differential, and I consider that a negotiation. Who's going to do what? Who's going to be responsible for what? But over the course of their marriage, that stressors in life occur. And those stressors could be economic, they could be health, they could be a disparity in terms of education, where one person gets more education than the other, economic circumstances. And what happens in both married couples and couples that eventually divorce is that the stress over time causes them to kind of grow apart. And the wife or the husband will say, wow, this isn't what I thought it would be. This isn't what I signed on for. I don't think you love me like you did in the beginning. You don't pay attention to me like you used to. I'm not sure I feel about you the same way. And so they begin to question the viability of the marriage.
Yeah. You said that marriage is not English literature.
Yeah, it's not, yeah.
So Chinese people are known for valuing family, but this often means that the weaker party, normally the female party, in marriage makes sacrifices and endures for the sake of their family. So should this be seen as a moral virtue in marriage or as a form of exploitation caused by the unequal power dynamics?
Great question, and I think it's certainly a form of exploitation if you view it that way. Or is it a moral virtue that a woman is self-sacrificing? She does things for her child and for her husband and for the family and works outside of the home with that. So those power differentials exist. And I think that successful couples need to be able to talk about that and talk about expectations. So I think all marriages, all couples have to sort through that. My expectations, wherever they come from, have to be kind of integrated and sorted out with my wife or with my husband. And that requires conversation. You can't just assume this is the way it's supposed to be. You have to talk about it in order to be successful.
Changes in income, in decisions about having children or not, or even control over initiating sexual activity can all influence the dynamics of power within a marriage.
Absolutely.
And so from a global perspective, especially comparing the United States and China, what similarities and differences do you see in marriage and family?
Now, in theory, you would think that there would be a shift in the balance in the power differential between men and women, but that's not the case. What's happened for most women is that they still feel the pressure to perform the traditional role of wife and mother, but and also working in a full career, they have the pressure of a full career. So for women in particular, it's not been a role substitution, it's been a role expansion. So they're doing a lot of work. Women are very stressed by having to maintain the obligations of marriage and also the obligations of working in a full-time career. And a lot of the pressure doesn't come necessarily from men, it comes from the women themselves. They see what their mother has done or what their grandmother has done and they're saying, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. And they feel pressure to be the traditional wife and mother, but also are pursuing a career that may require them to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. So women are very, very stressed by this in a lot of ways. And I think an increase in the divorce rate has to do with the fact that women have the economic options to not have to be married. I can take care of myself just fine. I can take care of my child just fine. I don't need a man to do that for me. And so it actually frees up women, the economic independence does, but it places men in a dilemma because a lot of men want that traditional wife that just isn't going to be there.
For example, as women's education level increase, as you just mentioned, women's the willingness to marry appears to decline, and the average age at marriage is gradually rising. In contrast, men's willingness to marry seems higher. So does this trend give women, Chinese women, more power in marriage, do you think?
It certainly gives Chinese women more power in making a selection of a husband. I think, you know, as men, if we recognize that and understand that, life would be much easier, that women are really, really smart and really have a lot of power in relationships. But it's not always obvious. You know, you often think the man is in charge of the household, the man is in charge of the family. And a clever woman knows how to work that.
She knows how to feel that.
Yeah, exactly. And I see that in Mexico, I see that in Turkey, I see that in many other countries as well, is that the man is going to be out front, but the woman is kind of the power behind the success in good marriages.